It may be difficult to hear, but this is the truth. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is power. And in the hands of a woman who understands her worth, silence becomes the most dangerous force that lives inside the dance of desire. A man can resist beauty, he can resist kindness, he can even resist love when it feels too heavy for him to carry. But what he cannot resist, what his very soul cannot unhook from, is the silence of the feminine he cannot penetrate. The silence that doesn't beg, doesn't explain, doesn't crumble. The silence that forces him to confront himself. Men are not obsessed with what they can hold. They are obsessed with what they cannot reach. Carl Jung spoke of the anima, the inner feminine every man longs for, yet never fully possesses. When a woman withdraws into her silence, she becomes that anima in living form, unreachable, untouchable, dwelling in the unconscious realm of his psyche. His body may sit in daylight, but his dreams will be haunted by the shadow of the silent woman who does not yield. In a world where women are taught to speak, to explain, to prove themselves, the woman who chooses silence is terrifying. Her absence becomes louder than any words could ever be. He replays her in his mind over and over, desperately searching for a crack, for a sign, for an opening. But there is none. Her sovereignty is sealed. This silence is not passivity, it is dominion. It is the refusal to feed his ego with reassurance. And in that vacuum, he begins to starve. You think silence will make him forget you. The truth is the opposite. Words make men comfortable. Words give them closure, answers, a sense of control. Silence takes all of that away. It creates the wound of unfinished business, the unhealed cut that festers in his psyche. Silence is the eternal what if. It is the mirror that reflects his projections back to him, and he will chase his own reflection until madness takes him. Men are hunters by instinct, but hunting is meaningless when the prey does not run. When she simply disappears into herself, when she no longer feeds the chase, he becomes trapped in a paradox. His instincts scream for pursuit, but there is no trail to follow. He is forced inward, back into the caverns of his shadow, where obsession grows like vines. The more he tries to detach, the more entangled he becomes. He cannot fight silence with logic because silence is not logical. It is elemental. It is the feminine principle that disarms every strategy, every defense. And here lies the hidden cruelty. His obsession does not come from her presence, but from her withdrawal. She becomes a ghost that lives in his unconscious, an unfinished melody he cannot stop humming, a half-open door that leads nowhere. He obsesses because silence does not die. It lingers, echoing inside him like a cathedral of unanswered prayers. Do not mistake this for cruelty without purpose. The silence that makes men obsess forever is not born of pettiness. It is born of sovereignty. It is the feminine returning to herself, no longer wasting her energy trying to convince or convert. The silence is sacred because it is not about punishing him, it is about protecting her. Protecting her energy, her dignity, her soul from the erosion of giving too much. And yet understand this, silence is not easy. It demands strength to resist the urge to explain, to soothe, to prove. The ego craves validation, even in leaving. To remain silent is to sever the ties of ego games and stand inside the storm of your own power. It is to say, you will not define me by how I react to you. And in this stillness, something remarkable happens. The power shifts. He no longer controls the rhythm, you do. You become the embodiment of mystery, and mystery is the lifeblood of desire. Men do not obsess over the known, they obsess over the unknowable. And you, in your silence, become unknowable, a cipher, an eternal riddle that resists resolution. You awaken in him the eternal archetype of pursuit, the endless spiral of longing that no conquest can satisfy. And though he may try to drown you out with distractions, with new faces, with noise, the echo of your silence will always return. This is why silence is dangerous, because it is not passive, it is active absence. It is not emptiness, it is fullness contained. It is the refusal to bend, the refusal to give away the secret of your essence. And that refusal becomes the very thing he cannot live without. So remember, silence is not the end. It is the beginning of his obsession. It is the moment when the game shifts from flesh to psyche, from body to spirit. And once he enters that labyrinth, there is no escape. There is a haunting truth within the male psyche. He does not fear rejection as much as he fears irrelevance. A spoken rejection, however sharp, gives him closure. He can file it away, mark the story as complete, and walk forward with his ego intact. But the silence of a woman who withdraws without justification tears apart that illusion. It denies him the chance to rewrite the ending. It forces him into an endless loop, where the story never concludes, where the unfinished burns hotter than the completed. Jung understood this cycle well. The anima within a man is not a figure he can master. She is elusive, ethereal, constantly shifting. She appears in dreams, in fantasies, in projections onto real women, but she never allows full possession. When a woman withdraws into silence, she becomes the living manifestation of that archetype, the unreachable feminine that awakens both yearning and torment. She is the reminder that the deepest desires are never satisfied by acquisition, only inflamed by distance. And in that distance, obsession takes root. Silence creates a void. A man's mind abhors the void, it must fill it. And so he fills it with memory, with fantasy, with endless speculation about what was meant, what could have been, what might still be. Every detail becomes amplified. The glance, the gesture, the last words exchanged, he rewinds them, dissects them, searches for hidden meaning. In truth, he is not replaying her. He is replaying himself through her absence, confronting the parts of his psyche he cannot bear to see. You must understand, silence is alchemy. It transforms his fleeting attraction into an enduring fixation. Where words might have softened the sting, silence sharpens it into a blade that cuts deeper with time. The masculine ego is wired to conquer, to solve, to close the circle. Your silence refuses to give him that satisfaction. It leaves the circle open, the door ajar, the fire smoldering without release. And here the Stoics provide a lesson. Seneca wrote that what we fear most is not pain itself, but the unknown surrounding it. Silence is the unknown. It is the unanswered question, the unclosed wound, the abyss that mocks his certainty. He can face a battle, he cannot face a mystery. Your silence is the one battlefield he cannot control. You may wonder, does silence make him love you more? No, it makes him need you more. Love is light, need is shadow. Love desires union, need cannot let go. In silence, you awaken the darker bond, the one that does not fade with time. The silent woman becomes not a memory, but an imprint, an invisible mark on his psyche that he cannot erase. But silence also tests him. For the man who is shallow, who lives only on the surface, silence will send him running into the arms of distraction. He will search for easy noise, for voices that soothe him, for new women who give him the validation he craves. But for the man who is deeper, silence becomes a mirror. It forces him to wrestle with himself, to confront the shadow he has long denied. And that confrontation breeds obsession, because he does not know whether he seeks her, or himself, or both entwined in one haunting figure. Now hear this, silence is not a game. It is not manipulation for its own sake. It is a boundary. It is the woman's refusal to bleed energy into spaces unworthy of her essence. To remain silent is not to punish him, it is to protect yourself. It is to claim that sacred space where your dignity cannot be bargained away. And when you embody this, your silence radiates strength, not weakness. You, standing in silence, embody the archetype of the queen, the sovereign who does not chase, who does not plead, who does not lower herself to beg for understanding. Her silence is not coldness, but majesty. And majesty does not need to explain. Majesty simply is. And yet, in this paradox lies the fire, for it is precisely this majesty that keeps him chained. He kneels not because you demanded it, but because your silence stripped him of the illusion of control. He kneels because he cannot command what he cannot touch. He kneels because in the vacuum of your silence, he discovered the truth. He was never the hunter. He was always the hunted. This is why silence is feared, why silence is desired, why silence becomes obsession. Because it is not passive absence, but active presence withheld. And that absence, paradoxically, fills every space in his mind. There are women who believe that speaking more will bind a man closer. They think that explaining, justifying, and offering endless reassurance will hold him in place. Yet the opposite unfolds. Words dilute, words pacify, words give him an escape route. Silence, however, tightens the chain. It leaves him no map, no compass, no conclusion. He is left wandering inside the labyrinth of his own projections, searching for a door that does not exist. Jungian psychology teaches that every man projects his anima, his inner feminine, onto the women he encounters. He does not see her as she truly is. He sees her as a mirror of what he lacks within himself. This is why obsession takes root not because of who the woman is, but because of what she represents in his unconscious. When she goes silent, the projection collapses. He is foe. Are said to confront the barren place within him that her presence once animated. This is agony because he cannot return to ignorance. He has glimpsed a piece of his soul through her, and her silence now denies him access to it. The most dangerous silence is not anger, not punishment, not revenge. It is indifference. The silence that does not fight, does not chase, does not seek to wound. It is the silence of withdrawal, of transcendence, of a woman who has pulled her energy back into herself. That indifference cuts deeper than any cruel word because it whispers, "You no longer exist in my world." To a man's ego, this is unbearable. He would rather be hated than forgotten, for hatred at least acknowledges his presence. Silence erases him completely. You may not see it outwardly. He may posture, pretend, distract himself with noise and faces and shallow victories. But the imprint of your silence seeps into him. It surfaces at night when he is alone. It appears in flashes when he hears a song, sees a gesture, catches a scent that reminds him of you. It stalks him in dreams, where his anima shape-shifts into your face, always elusive, always just out of reach. He cannot command his unconscious to let you go, for silence planted its seed there. And this seed grows not in light, but in shadow. Obsession is the child of deprivation. What is freely given rarely breeds fixation. What is withheld becomes sacred, untouchable, irresistible. Men are conditioned to equate silence with loss, and loss is the wound that never heals. This is why even years later, even after other loves, he may still return in thought to the silent one. She becomes the archetype of unfinished desire, the eternal ghost he carries. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke." Yet here lies the paradox. Silence does not allow him to revoke. He cannot shift his estimate because there is no closure, no explanation, no anchor to release him. Your silence forces him to wrestle not with you, but with himself. He cannot undo what was never finished. You must understand the danger of this power. To go silent without strength is to collapse into avoidance, and avoidance is weakness. But to go silent from sovereignty, to withdraw because you no longer need to prove, because you no longer beg for recognition, this is shadow mastery. It is the integration of the dark feminine, the aspect that does not seek approval, that does not soothe the male ego, that simply stands in her own fullness. And here is the truth you may resist. Silence will not always bring him back. Silence will not always make him chase. But silence will always shift the power. Whether he flees or obsesses, whether he distracts himself or kneels, silence forces him to react to you. And that is enough. For sovereignty is not about controlling him, it is about controlling yourself. Imagine this. A man, haunted, pacing at night, replaying every moment, every glance, every word he wished he had said. He reaches for his phone, but there is no reply. He searches for signs, but finds only stillness. He tells himself he doesn't care, but his chest tightens when silence greets him again. Days stretch into weeks, and still he returns to the same place, the emptiness where her voice used to be. And in that emptiness, obsession roots deeper. Because what men forget is this: silence is not nothing. Silence is a presence too vast for words. It is the roar beneath the stillness, the storm beneath the calm. And the man who once thought he held her discovers that in truth, it is she who holds him, not through speech, not through touch, but through the invisible power of absence. A man cannot escape the silence of the woman he once touched, because silence does not fade. Words can be forgotten, arguments can be dismissed, promises can be rewritten, but silence lingers. It becomes the ghost in the room, the unspoken presence that follows him into every corner of his life. He may not speak of it, he may not admit it, but it eats at him in moments of stillness. And the more he tries to drown it out with noise, the louder it grows. Silence is the womb of obsession. It is the absence that transforms memory into myth. Without silence, she would remain ordinary, merely another chapter in his story. With silence, she becomes untouchable, the mystery he cannot solve, the fire he cannot extinguish. Every man has within him a primal hunger for the unattainable. It is not conquest that binds him forever. It is the longing for what slips beyond his grasp. Jung wrote of individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating one's shadow. But most men resist this path. They prefer distraction over confrontation. And so when faced with silence, rather than turn inward to meet the parts of himself he projected onto her, he clings tighter to the image of her that lives in his unconscious. The silent woman becomes not a memory, but a symbol, the embodiment of all he has yet to integrate. This is why he obsesses, why he returns in thought even when years have passed. He does not chase her, he chases himself through her. And yet, silence is not only torment, it is also seduction. For what men crave more than pleasure is uncertainty. Uncertainty awakens his instinct, sharpens his focus, floods his veins with adrenaline. A woman who explains herself offers him safety, but safety is dull. A woman who withdraws into silence awakens in him the primal state of alertness, the state of not knowing. And this not knowing is the soil where desire grows wild and uncontained. You, in your silence, become untamed. You step outside the world of his control, beyond his strategies, beyond his power to categorize you. And this terrifies him because the male ego depends on knowing where it stands. Your silence denies him that certainty. It strips him of ground, and in his imbalance, he clings tighter. Obsession, after all, is born not from possession, but from disorientation. But make no mistake, silence is not meant to be wielded as a trick. Silence is not a tactic for manipulation. It is an embodiment of power. It is the natural language of a woman who no longer needs to prove herself, who no longer wastes energy explaining her worth. To remain silent is to rest in sovereignty, to allow your presence to speak without words, to let your absence echo louder than noise. And here lies the paradox. Men are not obsessed with the women who give them everything. They are obsessed with the women who give them nothing they can consume, nothing they can control. Silence denies him ownership. Silence denies him certainty. Silence denies him the illusion of dominance. And so silence makes him kneel, not before her body, but before her essence, the part of her he cannot touch, cannot define, cannot ever fully claim. This is why the most powerful queens of history, myth, and psyche have always understood the weapon of silence. Cleopatra, silent in her chambers, was more powerful than armies. The virgin archetype, cloaked in mystery, compelled worship without a word. The dark goddess, silent in the abyss, commanded fear and reverence alike. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is divinity unspoken. And you, when you embody this silence, enter that lineage. You become more than a woman, you become archetype. You awaken his anima, his shadow, his longing, his fear. And no matter what face he shows the world in the quiet hours of night, it is your silence that drapes over him like a shroud. For the truth is this: silence does not end a story. Silence eternalizes it. The man who heard your last word may forget you. The man who never heard the end will carry you forever. There is a cruel elegance to silence. It does not demand, it does not beg, it does not prove. And yet it conquers. The man who once believed he had power over her discovers that power slipping through his fingers, not because she fought, but because she withdrew. This is the paradox men cannot reconcile, that the absence of her voice resounds louder than any argument, louder than any plea, louder than any declaration of love. In Jung's language, the silence of the woman is the veil of the unconscious. It is the anima shrouded in mist, reminding him that he is not whole, that something within him is missing. When she goes silent, she embodies his unfinished inner work. And this unfinished work haunts him, for the psyche does not rest until the shadow is faced. Yet instead of turning inward, he projects outward, chasing her image, her silence, her ghost, as though possession of her could resolve the void inside himself. But the void is his, and that is why he obsesses. Obsession is not about her. It is about what she mirrors, the part of himself he cannot own. Silence denies him the chance to bury this truth under distraction. It rips away the illusions he used to comfort his ego and leaves him naked before himself. He cannot conquer silence, he can only succumb to it. And you, standing in silence, are no longer merely woman. You are threshold. You are the crossing between his comfort and his terror, between his ego and his shadow. To face your silence is to face the abyss within himself. That is why he cannot let go. He does not chase you. He chases the wholeness he glimpsed through you. Yet silence is not merely psychological. It is spiritual. The ancients knew this. The Stoics spoke of the dignity of restraint, of the discipline to remain unmoved when provoked. Marcus Aurelius wrote that true strength lies in the mind that refuses to be enslaved by reaction. In your silence, you embody this discipline. You prove that sovereignty does not scream, it stands. It is not the noise of defense that makes you powerful, but the calm refusal to descend into chaos. And here is the deeper truth. Silence is not only what makes him knee. Silence is what frees you. For every word spoken to convince him, to justify yourself, to demand recognition, is an energy given away. Silence reclaims that energy. It gathers it back into your body, your spirit, your soul. In silence, you return to yourself. You no longer stand on his battlefield, you stand on your throne. You may feel the temptation to break it, to reach out, to explain, to soften his suffering or your own. But to remain silent is to resist the hunger of the ego, both his and yours. It is to choose sovereignty over validation. It is to accept that you are not responsible for his obsession, for his longing, for his inability to let go. That is his battle. Yours is to remain whole. And in this wholeness, something alchemical happens. The silence that torments him liberates you. The silence that binds him unchains you. He is pulled deeper into the labyrinth of his projections, while you ascend into clarity. The roles invert. The one who thought he had the power becomes enslaved by memory, while the one who seemed to retreat rises in dominion. Do you see it now? Silence is not weakness. Silence is not retreat. Silence is shadow mastery, the feminine in her dark glory, wielding absence as a weapon sharper than words. Men may forget the voices of women who argued, who pleaded, who confessed, but they will never forget the silence of the one who walked away. Because silence, unlike words, cannot be undone. It is final, eternal, unanswerable. It is the one truth the male ego cannot conquer, cannot rewrite, cannot silence in return. And so, the dangerous silence of the sovereign woman becomes the echo that never fades, the riddle that never resolves, the flame that never dies. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.